I'm going to tell you a story about Diet Coke today and how it gave me imposter syndrome, which is a bit of a stretch maybe, but there was imposter syndrome involved. A couple weeks ago, I was at a soccer game at the school Katie teaches at and my kids go to, and it was in the evening, and I wanted to get a Diet Coke, so I walked over to the concession stand, and 20-ounce bottle of Diet Coke was $2.50. I had no money, and I thought Katie did. So I was going to take the bottle of Diet Coke, and I was going to walk over to Katie, get the money, and come back and pay the lady at the concessions stand. And while I was there's a guy that walked up, and he said, "I got you, don't worry about it." Super nice guy, very kind thing to do. And I said, oh, thank you. And and here's where the imposter syndrome comes in, and how quickly old stories from the past can just flood through and completely change how I'm feeling and what's going on. So I was wearing steel-toed boots, pair of jeans that were a little bit rugged, call them work jeans, obviously, and a Carhartt shirt that was a long sleeve Carhartt shirt untucked. I felt a little bit grungy, if that's a word. Here's a guy buying me a Diet Coke that is in just a nice polo, nice pants, his loafers, still a word, they look like loafers. This man was like the epitome of being put together. And he's buying my Diet Coke for $2.50, and he pulls out a bunch of cash and pays for it. And in a moment, instead of having gratitude, I'll tell you what came in all of a sudden was as if I was in 5th grade and I had no money because my mom sent me no money for snacks after school. Whether she did or not, I don't know, but that's what it felt like. And here's a 7th grader who I thought was awesome. So, any 7th grader was awesome when I was in 5th grade, who is buying me a snack. And in a moment, I felt this massive wave of imposter syndrome. Like, here I am, I look grungy, this guy looks completely put together. He just bought me a Diet Coke because I have no cash. And in a moment, just this flood of feeling inadequate, imperfect, like I don't have it all together, just completely fully seen. I'm unsuccessful, he's successful. These aren't true necessarily, but they felt very true to me in the moment. And I could barely even say thank you and I appreciate it. And hey, my name's Derek. What's your name? And stuff like that. And what's even more interesting, so I had a short conversation with him, and I guess part of it was I had been told about him that he was a nice guy and stuff like this, and I had never met him before. Here I am recounting the story a week later, and I'm making this guy out to be almost like what feels like God. Right, this guy just had it all together. And I felt like I didn't have it all together at all. And I felt like he completely saw through me, that I didn't have it all together. And what's interesting is I've done a lot of work in the last few years of coming to terms, being okay with, I don't have it all together. And I'm not trying to convey to anybody that I have it all together. But in a moment, this guy who looked like he had it all together just completely smash the story that it's okay to not have it all together. And so I walked off, and what's really interesting is for the rest of that night, and even as I woke up the next morning, I was still feeling about this whole imposter syndrome about feeling like I didn't have it all together, and I completely got seen by somebody who did have it all together. Over the fact he bought me a Diet Coke for $2.50. And I just wanted to hide. I didn't want to put forth any effort at work that day. I didn't want to do anything. I just felt completely crushed because an old story about being inadequate and being seen and not having it all together just came flooding back. And I came face to face with a choice. How was I going to respond? It was over 12 hours ago now that this incident happened. And I had a choice. Was I going to let that run my day, or was I going to choose how I responded to it? You see, it's the distinction between, is it an outside in perspective that my circumstances dictates how I act and what I do, or from the inside, do I get to choose how I show up? An older version of me would have just hid the entire day. And not like physically hid, but I would have sat behind a computer screen and just found things to do where I didn't have to talk to anybody, because I didn't feel like talking to anybody. Because I felt about this small, and when I feel this small, I don't really want to put forth the effort and energy to talk to anybody and engage with somebody. But the power of commitment, the power of choice, the power of radical responsibility, I came to terms with it. I said, you know what? I recognize that I feel this small, then I'm not going to act like I'm this small. I'm going to act like I'm a human being, and the guy bought me a Diet Coke, and it's okay, and he was dressed a lot nicer than I was, and he looked like he had it all together, and I looked like I didn't have it all together, or that's the story I was telling myself. And so I pulled myself together, so let me not make a joke about that. I made a choice. I made a choice to act on what I knew to be true, and that is, I'm a human being, and I felt, the word marginalized just came up. I felt marginalized. Let me sit with that one for a moment. I felt marginalized because he had money and I didn't. $2.50 to be exact. But it's amazing how it's not really about the amount of money. It's just that this guy had money and I didn't in that moment, that he was buying me a Diet Coke, and I felt marginalized. And the temptation, the draw was to act as if I was marginalized. The draw, I really wanted to feel like I was marginalized and not do anything of any significance or importance that day, or just do anything that day. But I said, I'm not going to act as if I'm marginalized. I'm not going to act the way I'm feeling. Because what I realize now, and follow me on this one if this one isn't familiar to you, is that we live in the feelings of our thoughts. You see, we think a certain way about ourselves, about our situation, and we feel based on our thoughts, and then we act based on how we're feeling. So there's a thought that says, I'm marginalized. It makes me feel this small. It makes me feel like I have an imposter syndrome. And then I just hide, essentially, behind a computer screen all day. Or I could say, you know what? I'm not marginalized. That guy was buying me a Diet Coke. He wasn't looking down on me. It's all good. I'm fine. And if I create that thought, if I come from that place of being, there's a feeling of confidence. There's a feeling of empowerment. There's a feeling of, I can do what I need to get done today. And I chose that. I chose my thoughts. I chose to see how I saw myself. I chose my identity that said, I'm a human being. And he was dressed a lot nicer than I was. And it's okay. I move on. But what I felt really, really, really strongly for the first time in quite a long time was that I was marginalized. I was inadequate. I was an imposter. He had a lot of money and I didn't have any money, and I'm not important. I'm insignificant. All these things. And these are the stories that I used to tell myself all the time, and I believed them. I used to believe them. And I used to act, and I used to come from a place of, I'm not important. I'm not significant. I don't control my life. Things are just going to happen to me. He has money. I don't have money. And when I come from that place, I don't take responsibility for my life. So what did I do? Here's exactly what I did. I sat down and I said, okay, I got some people that I needed to call about certain things. I got some things that I need to do. I have some conversations that I need to have with some people. I have some coaching I need to get done. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to choose who I am. I'm able to get things done. I'm not marginalized. I'm okay. I'm Derek. That's who I am. Great, I'm Derek. And so I spent an hour talking to people. I spent an hour calling people. I spent an hour communicating with people specifically about certain things. And the amount of energy that I created in doing that took me far, 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 far away from the feeling that I was feeling just before about being an imposter over a Diet Coke bottle. And I recognize this as an example for life in all of us. Are we going to let life's circumstances dictate how we act, or are we going to choose from an inside-out perspective how we show up and what we get done? I chose to push through. I chose to show up in a different way than I chose to show up before. I got things done. I accomplished things. I connected with people. I impacted people. But I was very, very tempted to just slouch back, sit back, and be marginalized, because that was a story I told myself for a long time, is that's who I was. But what I didn't realize back then was I got to choose who I was. I got to choose how I showed up. I got to choose to take a deep breath and realize that life doesn't dictate how I act. Life doesn't dictate what I do. I get to choose. You get to choose. The ball's always in our court. For most of life, I thought the ball was in somebody else's court, and I had to go beg for a racket to even hit the ball if it came over to my side of the court. But what I realize now is I have a racket in my hand. I have a ball in my hand. The ball is always in my court. I always get to choose how I serve. I always get to choose how I return the ball. The ball is always in my court. And what I recognize now is the next time I feel like an imposter, like I don't have it all together and somebody else does, and they're seeing me as this guy who doesn't have it all together, I gotta say, yep, I don't have it all together. Let's be real. Let's be authentic. I want to raise my hand and say, I don't have it all together. And what I know about you is that you don't have it all together. And that's not a judgment on you. That's not a critique on you. That is a human condition, is that we don't have it all together. I never had it all together, but for most of my life, I thought that I was supposed to have it all together. I thought that I was supposed to show other people that I had it all together. And life has been a lot more enjoyable. Life has been a lot more calm, a lot more peaceful. Now that I realize that it's okay to not have it all together, because that's just, that is who I am. I take radical responsibility, radical ownership of my life. And I don't have it all together, and I choose how I show up today, and I choose what I get done today, and I choose how I interact today. I choose. I get to choose. And to bring this full circle, the thought, the feeling that came back in a moment when that guy bought my Diet Coke bottle for $2.50 was that I didn't have a choice. I was unimportant. I was insignificant. I was an imposter. I was seen. I don't have it all together. Who the heck do you think you are, Derek? And I chose not to believe that. I chose to work through it. I chose to not hide. I chose to be seen. Because I'm me. I'm authentic. I'm real. And I don't want to encourage or engender behavior in someone else that it's not okay to be authentic. And I'm not saying that guy was inauthentic. I think he was fully authentic. But when I'm inauthentic with you, when I put on a facade for you, what I'm unintentionally doing is inviting you to be in such a way that is inauthentic and not transparent. And I'm encouraging you to show up as an imposter. I'm encouraging you to not embrace the human being that you are. See, how I show up with you is how I'm encouraging you to show up with me. And I believe that we as human beings are an infinite well of authenticity, an infinite well of an opportunity to connect with people, human being to human being, and that cannot happen if I'm not being real. That's my lesson from a Diet Coke bottle for $2.50. I guess you could say that was a pretty cheap lesson. It was a $2.50 lesson. And I'm really, really glad that I chose to not act as if I was an imposter, to not act as if I was insignificant, because I get to choose how I act. I get to choose how I respond. I get to choose. I choose to be authentic. I choose to be seen as if I don't have it all together. And if somebody doesn't like that, that's okay. That's their decision. That's a piece that they need to work through. When I was concerned with having it all together or being seen as if I had it all together, I saw other people. I just judged them. Do they have it all together or do they not have it all together? That's all that I cared about. What I want to care about now, what I do care about now is, how are you as a human being doing? How can I connect with you? How can I serve you? Where can I support you? How can I be with you? How can I impact you? How can I make this interaction a positive interaction? You know, I can't care about that if I'm just concerned about whether or not I have it all together or whether or not you have it all together. So, from me to you, we're humans. We don't have it all together. And to the person who just joined, to Larry and Scott who are watching, to everybody else who's watching this in not real time, on feedback, congratulations. You don't have it all together. I don't have it all together. Let's be friends.